The rain had turned the last mile of the Larkcourt Drive to a river of grey. Juliet Eldstone came up it on foot, her single trunk on a farm cart behind her, and she heard the screaming before she saw the house. It was not a human sound. It was a horse, high and frantic, the sort of sound that goes straight past the ear and into the chest. She began to run. The drive opened into a gravel forecourt, and the forecourt was full of men. 6 of them, perhaps 8, all shouting at once. In the centre of them, a grey mare reared against a wall of ropes. Her eyes rolled white, her forelegs cutting the wet air. A groom had a rope on her and was being dragged. Another swung a second rope, like a man trying to hang the sky. The mare came down hard, spun, and struck the mounting block with her shoulder. Blood ran pink in the rain along her leg. On the steps above them stood a tall man in a black coat. He was not shouting. He watched the whole ruin with a stillness that frightened Juliet more than the noise did. "Shoot her," he said. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. A keeper by the stable arch already had a fowling piece against his shoulder, and he lowered his cheek to the stock. "No." The word came out of Juliet before she had decided to say it. She was already moving. She dropped her wet bonnet in the gravel. She put her hand flat against the keeper's barrel and pushed it toward the ground, and the man was so astonished by her that he let her. "Give her room," Juliet said. "All of you. Back to the wall. Drop the ropes." "Miss," a groom began. "Drop them." Something in her voice did what her small size could not. The men fell back a pace. The ropes went slack in the mud. And Juliet Eldstone, 22 years old, soaked to the skin, unknown to a single soul on that gravel, walked out into the open toward a horse that had already opened one man's scalp that morning. She did not look at the mare's eyes. She had learned that a long time ago in her father's stable, before all of it was sold. You did not stare a frightened creature down. You made yourself small and dull and boring. You gave it nothing to fear. She stopped 6 feet off and turned half away and looked at the rain. "There now," she said. "Not to the mare, to the air. There now. What a great deal of fuss." The mare's ears came forward 1/2 an inch. Juliet took the plain snaffle bit out of her pocket. It had been her father's. It was the one thing of his she had refused to sell. A common thing, worth almost nothing, worn smooth by 40 years of good horses. She held it low and let the rain run off it, and she waited. 1 minute. 2. The men behind her had gone silent. On the steps, the man in black had not moved. The mare took 1 step toward her, then another. She lowered her ruined head and lipped at the bit in Juliet's open hand. Juliet slid her other hand up under the wet jaw, slow as sunrise, and stood there stroking the great trembling neck. The animal's breathing came down, out of terror, and into something that was only tiredness. "There," Juliet murmured. "There. You are not going to die today. Nobody sensible is going to shoot a mare worth 200 guineas because she was afraid of a rope." She looked up then. The man on the steps was looking at her. He was younger than the black coat had made him. 30, perhaps. Ash-brown hair, wet at the temples, and eyes of so deep a blue they read as black across the forecourt. A handsome face, and a closed one. He looked at her the way a man looks at a bill he did not expect. "Take the mare in," he said to the grooms, without moving his eyes from Juliet. "Dry her. Poultice the shoulder." A pause. "Do not shoot anything today. The men came and took the mare, gentle now that she was gentle, and led her away. Juliet stood alone in the rain, with her father's snaffle in her fist, and mud to her knees. "You are the woman my grandmother sent for," the man said. "It was not a question. I am, Your Grace. Juliet Eldstone." She curtsied, which was absurd in that mud, and did it anyway. The Dowager Duchess engaged me as her companion. "You are late. The Marrow Bridge is down. I walked the last of it." He looked at her wet skirts, her ruined bonnet in the gravel, the blood of his mare drying on her wrist. Whatever he saw did not soften him. "Dorset will show you your room," he said, and turned and went into the house. Juliet picked up her bonnet. She did not see the butler come out. Dorset was a spare, grey, upright man of 60, and he had watched the whole business from the shelter of the doorway, and he was still watching her now, with an expression she could not read. He came down 2 steps toward his master, who had paused inside the open door. "Your Grace," Dorset said quietly, "shall I have Mrs. Tolley send up a cold supper for the young lady?" The Duke of Northwell looked back once, across the forecourt, at the small, drenched figure retrieving her hat. "She won't last a month here," he told his butler, and went in. Dorset said nothing, but he thought, standing in the rain-loud doorway, that in 40 years of service he had never once seen the grey mare come to a stranger's hand. He filed the thought away where he kept such things. He went down the wet steps to carry the young lady's trunk himself. Juliet Eldstone had come to Lark Court to disappear. She had told the Dowager Duchess only part of the truth in the careful letters that had won her the place. She had said that she was a gentleman's daughter, orphaned, without fortune, obliged to make her own way. All of that was true. She had not said the rest. She had not said that there was, in fact, a fortune, that it was hers, that it sat in the strong box of a cousin she would have crossed a county to avoid. Her father had died when she was 19, and he had left her £4,000 and a piece of foolishness. The money was held in trust until she married or turned 25, whichever came first, and the trustee he had named, meaning to be kind, meaning to give her a guardian, was his nephew, Silas Probyn. Mr. Probyn had a son. Mr. Probyn had a plan. If Juliet married the son, the £4,000 stayed in the Probyn hands, where Mr. Probyn had already, quietly, spent a good deal of it. Juliet had refused Clement Probyn in the drawing-room in October, and had left the house in November with 15 shillings and a snaffle bit. She had answered an advertisement under a false direction. She had signed her letters J. Eldstone, and prayed the name meant nothing to anyone in that far green county. 25 was 3 years off. She had only to remain hidden and unmarried until then, and the money became her own, and no man on earth could touch it. 3 years. She could be invisible for 3 years. She had been invisible most of her life already. She had not counted on Lark Court. The house was dying, and it took Juliet less than a week to see how. It was a beautiful house. That was the pity of it. It stood long and low and honey-coloured above a valley of its own, a house that had, as the old phrase went, grown out of the land rather than been set down on it. There were 200 years of good sense in its bones, and it was going to the bad the way a strong man goes to the bad, slowly and from the inside, and with no one saying the word aloud. The silver was tarnishing in the drawers. The linen was not being turned. Half the great rooms stood shut and sheeted, and the shut rooms had a smell of damp that meant a roof somewhere had been leaking for a year, and no one had climbed to look. In the kitchen, the range smoked because the flue had not been swept. The cook, Mrs. Tolley, wept over a joint of beef that had come in green from the butcher, and could not send it back because, she said, wiping her red hands on her apron, because Mr. Grimshaw settled with the butcher, and Mr. Grimshaw would not be told his business by a cook. "And who," Juliet asked, "is Mr. Grimshaw?" "The agent, miss. The steward. He come after the old Duke died, and old Mrs. Pettifer that was housekeeper died the winter after. God rest her. And there's been no housekeeper since. Only Mr. Grimshaw. That has the running of everything, and the keys of everything." "There is no housekeeper?" Juliet looked at the smoking range, the green beef, the two overworked maids. "In a house this size?" "There's Mr. Grimshaw," said Mrs. Tolley, as though that were the same thing, or the opposite of a thing. She could not have said which. Juliet was a companion, not a housekeeper. Her whole employment was to sit with an old woman 4 hours a day. But she had been raised to run a household. A small one, a manor of no account, but run it she had, from the age of 14, after her mother died. She knew what a linen press should smell like. She knew that beef should not come in green. She knew above all that a house where one man held all the keys and answered to no one was a house being robbed. She said none of this. She was here to be invisible. She folded her hands and learned the names of the servants, and sat with the Dowager Duchess, and held her tongue. Holding her tongue lasted until the 3rd week. The Dowager Duchess of Northwell was named Petronella, and she was 81, and she missed nothing. She sat by the fire in the small south parlour, which was the one warm room in the house, with a shawl the colour of a pigeon's breast and a spine like a poker. Her hands had gone to knots with age. Her eyes had not gone anywhere at all. On the first afternoon, she looked Juliet up and down for a full half-minute, and then said, "You are not what I expected. I am sorry to disappoint, Your Grace." "I did not say I was disappointed. I said you were not what I expected. There is a great difference, girl, and if you mean to get on in this world, you had best learn to hear it." She tapped the arm of her chair. "Sit. Not there. There, where I can see your face. My grandson tells me you gentled the grey, in the rain, on your first hour. The mare was only frightened, ma'am." "The mare," said the Dowager, "has put 2 grooms to bed since Michaelmas, and was to be shot on Tuesday. Do not tell me she was only frightened, as though you had picked up a dropped glove." She studied Juliet with those unclouded eyes. "That mare belonged to my granddaughter, to Cecily, my grandson's sister. She is dead." Juliet went still. "I'm very sorry, ma'am." "Everyone is very sorry. It is the least useful sentence in the language." The old woman looked into the fire. For a moment the sharpness left her, and something older and worse sat in its place. She was 23, a fever, in the spring. She was mistress of this house. My grandson never married. There was no duchess, so Cecily kept the keys, and kept the peace, and kept the whole place breathing. And then, 1 week in April, she was too warm at dinner, and the week after she was in the ground at Larkcourt Church. And my grandson— She stopped. "My grandson," she said, in quite a different voice, "has not been in the East Wing since, nor spoken her name if he can help it, nor looked at a single thing that wants doing in this house, because everything that wants doing was hers. Do you understand me?" "I think I do, ma'am." "I think you do too. That is why you are the first companion in a year I have not sent away inside the week." Petronella folded her ruined hands. "Now, you have been here 19 days. Tell me what you have seen. And do not be tactful. I have no time left for tactful." So Juliet told her. She had not meant to. But there is a particular relief in being asked a true question by someone who wants the true answer, and she had been holding it all in for 19 days. She told her about the green beef, and the smoking flue, and the sheeted rooms, and the roof that leaked somewhere over the east wing. She told her about the linen going to rot in the presses. She told her, carefully, about Mr. Grimshaw, who settled every account and held every key, and could not be told his business. The dowager listened without moving. When Juliet had finished, the old woman was quiet for a long time. "My grandson," she said at last, "is not a fool. He is a grieving man, which is a different thing, though from the outside they wear the same coat. He has let one man hold the reins because he cannot bear to touch them himself. That is his weakness. It may prove a very expensive one." She turned her head. "You know something of accounts." "A little, ma'am. Do not be modest. I loathe modesty above all the false virtues." She held Juliet's eye. "I am going to make you useful. Not as a companion. Companions are furniture. I'm going to give you the running of the still room and the linen and the kitchen accounts, on my authority, which in this house is a good deal older than Mr. Grimshaw's. And we shall see what you find." "Your Grace," the Duke said, "I heard him say I would not last a month." Something almost like pleasure crossed the old woman's face. "Did he?" she said softly. "Then you have 9 days to prove him wrong. I suggest you use them." Juliet used them. The house did not believe in her, and the house said so, in the way of houses, below stairs, and out of her hearing. There was a wager in the servants' hall by the end of her first week, and everyone knew of it, and it was reckoned a fair one. A shilling said the new companion would be gone by Lady Day, packed off like the 3 before her, worn out by the cold rooms, and the grieving master, and the pink steward who ruled them both. The betting ran heavily against her. Even Prue, who liked her, had put her 6pence quietly on the month. Juliet knew of the wager within 3 days, because a woman who has been invisible all her life hears a great deal that louder people miss. She did not resent it. She thought it, on the whole, a very sensible bet. She had made it herself, in a manner of speaking, when she signed her false direction, and came north with 15 shillings and a snaffle bit. She did not mean to win it by argument. She had never in her life won anything by argument. She meant to win it the only way she trusted. That way was to be, quietly and without fuss, indispensable. One morning the house would wake and find it could no longer remember how it had managed before her. The wager would be forgotten, because the question it asked had stopped meaning anything at all. So she did not scold, and she did not command, and she did not once remind anyone that the Dowager Duchess had given her authority. She simply took hold of the things nobody else would touch, one after another, and did them well, and let the doing be its own argument. She began with the still room, because a still room is a house's honesty in miniature. She scoured it. She turned out 3 years of spoiled preserves and mouse-fouled flour. At the very back stood a set of shelves that had plainly been Cecily's own. Neat labels in a young woman's round hand, cordials and rose water, all gone to ruin now, all untouched since April. Juliet cleaned each jar and kept the labels. It seemed to her a small wrong to throw away the handwriting of the dead. She moved to the linen. She had the maids strike every press, then wash and turn and mend the whole of it. Where sheets had rotted through, she cut them down for bandages and dusters, so that nothing was wasted. She had the flue swept, which cost 8p, and stopped the kitchen smoking for the first time in a year. She sent the green beef back to the butcher in Marrow, with a note in her own hand, courteous and immovable, and the next beef came in red. And she began, quietly, to keep the kitchen book herself. It was a small book, a cook's book. What came in at the door, what was paid for it, week by week. The dowager had given her that much authority, and no more. But a house is a single body, and if you have your finger on one vein, you can feel the whole heart. Juliet wrote down what the butcher was truly paid, and what the fishmonger was truly paid, and what the chandler and the corn factor were truly paid, in the plain figures that the tradesman gave her at the door. And she noticed, within a fortnight, that her figures did not agree with the house. The butcher was paid 9 shillings a week. He said so himself, and showed her his own tally stick to prove it. But when the quarter's kitchen reckoning was posted up on the servants' board, as Mr. Grimshaw posted it, for form's sake, the butcher's line read 14, 5 shillings a week, on one tradesman. Juliet stood in the cold passage and looked at the posted sheet for a long time. She did not touch it. She went away and said nothing to anyone. She was very good at saying nothing. She had had years of practice. She was good at it because she had learned it young. A house where one voice is loud teaches the other voices to go quiet. Her father had not been cruel. He had only been grieved after her mother died, and grief in a big man fills every room, and a girl learns to move through a grieved house without knocking anything over. She had carried the accounts of that house from the age of 14. She had carried them well, and she had learned, doing it, a thing she never afterward forgot. A ledger is the one honest room in the world. There a woman's word is as good as any man's. A column adds up, or it does not. No amount of shouting will make a false sum true. She had loved the accounts for that. They did not care that she was small, or plain, or a girl. They only cared that she was right. She was right about the butcher's 5 shillings. She knew she was right. That was the trouble with being right. It sat in you like a swallowed stone, and would not be forgotten, however sensibly you told yourself to forget it. The Duke of Northwell noticed her the way one notices a change in weather, without wanting to, and all at once. He did not go to the kitchen or the still room. He was a duke. Those were another country. But he could not help observing that the flue no longer smoked at breakfast, that the coffee was hot, that the great cold dining table, at which he ate alone in silence every night, 17 feet of mahogany with one place laid at the end of it, had one evening been shortened. He came down to dinner, and the extra leaves were gone. The table was a modest 6 feet. His single place was laid at it, and it no longer looked like a man eating at the end of a coffin. "Who did this?" he said to Dorset. "Miss Eldstone thought your Grace might dine more comfortably, sir. She said a man ought not to have to shout the length of a barn to ask for the salt." A pause. "Shall I have it put back?" The Duke looked at the small, warm table. No, he said. He met her 3 days later in the long gallery by accident, which was the only way he met anyone that year. She had a basket of mended linen on her hip and a smudge of beeswax on her wrist, and she stood aside for him against the wall, eyes down, as a servant should. He went past her. Then he stopped. "You are the woman with the mare," he said. "Yes, Your Grace." "My grandmother has set you to the linen." "Among other things, sir." He looked at her then, properly looked, for the first time since the forecourt, now that she was dry, and it was daylight. She was small and quiet and brown-haired. No beauty, the kind of woman a ballroom would look straight through. Except that when she raised her eyes to answer him, they were level and grey-clear and entirely without fear. And he had not been looked at like that by anyone in a year. His servants looked at the floor. His grandmother looked through him. This woman looked at him as though he were simply a man who had asked her a question, and she had the answer, and she was deciding how much of it he could bear. It unsettled him. He was not used to being seen. "The mare is sound," he said abruptly. "The shoulder healed." "I am glad, sir." "You were right. She was worth more than a fright." He seemed to want to say something else, and to have no idea how. "That is all," he said, and went on down the gallery, and did not know why his own house felt for a moment less like a tomb. Juliet stood with the basket on her hip and watched him go. She thought, "There is a good man in there, drowning." And then she thought about the butcher's 5 shillings, the roof over the east wing, the £4,000 in Silas Probyn's strong box. She told herself firmly that none of it was her affair. She was here to be invisible for 3 years. She was not here to save a duke. She very nearly believed it. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. The month passed. Juliet did not leave. Nobody remarked on it in words, but the house remarked on it in 100 small ways. The maids, Prue and the 2 younger girls, brought their troubles to her now, instead of weeping into the coal scuttle. Mrs. Tolley cooked like a woman released from prison. Amos, the head groom, was a taciturn Yorkshireman of 50. He touched his hat to Juliet, as he would to a mistress. She had saved the grey. She came out on frosty mornings and knew a splint from a windgall. Even Dorset, who trusted no one under 60 on principle, had begun to bring the household questions to her that he had used to carry, uselessly, to a grieving master's shut door. She had, without a title, and without wishing it, begun to run the house. And the more of the house she could see, the worse the accounts looked. It was not only the butcher. It was everything. The dowager's authority let Juliet into the storerooms to inventory the linen. One grey afternoon, it carried her further than she meant to go. The great press of household stores was kept at the end of the north passage. The storeroom and the estate office shared a wall there, and a door. The office was Grimshaw's kingdom. But Grimshaw was gone to Marrow that day for the quarter sessions. The door between stood unlocked. Juliet told herself she was only counting sheets. She stood in the doorway of the estate office and looked at the ledgers on the shelf. There were 2 of them for the current year. That was the first thing. 2 field books, 2 rent rolls, bound alike in the same brown calf, standing side by side. One was worn at the corners from handling. One was clean. She should not have touched them. She knew she should not. She opened the clean one first. It was the fair copy, the one that was shown, when a thing was shown. Rents received, sums neat, the estate a little poor but honest, tenants all paid up, repairs accounted for. A roof over the east wing, she noticed, had been repaired last autumn for £40. She had stood under that roof 3 days ago and watched the rain come through it in 4 places. She opened the worn one. The worn one was the truth, and the truth was ugly. Here were the rents as they were truly gathered, higher in many cases than the fair copy owned. Old widows and small farmers had been squeezed for a shilling here, a shilling there, and the shillings did not appear in the fair book at all. Here were repairs charged for that had never been made. Here were tradesmen's bills marked paid at one figure in the fair book, and settled at a lower figure in the true one. The difference ran off the page and out of the house, the whole quiet river of it, into no name at all. Juliet stood in the failing light and understood that she was looking at 3 years of theft. Not a servant pocketing spoons. This was a man robbing a house from the roots, patiently, in good ink, while its master grieved upstairs and could not bear to look. Grimshaw had waited for exactly the right house. A house with no mistress, no housekeeper, a master who would sign anything sooner than open his sister's ledgers. He had settled into it like rot into a beam. She heard the outer door. She had not time to think. She put the worn book back exactly as it had stood, corner to corner, and she was in the storeroom counting sheets aloud with a slate in her hand when Mr. Grimshaw came in from Marrow with the rain on his shoulders. He was a soft, pink, pleasant-faced man of 40. He smiled a great deal. He smiled now. "Miss Eldstone, in my office." "In your storeroom, Mr. Grimshaw." She did not look up from the slate. "The Dowager Duchess has asked me to inventory the linen. 24 pair of Holland sheets, and 11 only whole. I make it a poor account. You keep a great many accounts these days for a companion. Her Grace keeps me busy." "Her Grace," said Grimshaw, still smiling, "is 81. She will not always be here to keep you busy." He came a step closer, soft-footed for a heavy man. "A word of counsel, Miss Eldstone, from one servant to another. This is a large house with a great deal of dark in it. A young woman with no friends and no family. For you have none, have you? Does well to be quiet, to keep to the linen, to ask no questions whose answers cannot help her." The smile did not move. "Companions come and go here. They do not last. I should hate to see you go before your time." Juliet set down the slate and looked at him, level and grey and unafraid. And she saw it, under the smile, for 1/2 second. He was afraid of her. That was the thing. He had come in smiling to frighten her, and it was his own fear that had brought him, because a clever woman with a slate had been standing too near his open door. "I keep excellent accounts, Mr. Grimshaw," she said pleasantly. "It is the one thing I do that no one has ever wished me to stop. Good evening." She walked out past him with her slate. Her hands did not shake until she was on the stairs. She did not go to the Duke. She thought about it for 3 days and 3 nights. She did not go. Her reasons were good ones. One of them was cowardice. To go to the Duke was to be seen. To be seen was to be asked her history, her people, her name. And behind her name stood Silas Probyn, and £4,000, and a marriage she had run across a county to escape. A companion who made an enemy of the steward would be turned off with a bad character. A companion turned off with a bad character would be traced. And once traced, once named, she was Miss Juliet Eldstone, the runaway heiress again, hunted home to be married to Clement Probyn for her money. Better to hold her tongue, better to keep her head down for 3 years and let a rich duke's house rob itself. It was not her house. It was not her fight. She told herself all of that. And then, on the 4th morning, she went out to the tenant cottages at Marrow End. The dowager wanted a basket of jelly carried to an old woman there. The old woman was Widow Sefton, 70 years old. Her cottage roof was a colander. Her rent had gone up at Lady Day, though nothing on God's earth had been done to earn it. Mr. Grimshaw says the master needs it, the old woman said, without complaint, folding her swollen hands. And the master's a good man that lost his sister, poor soul, so I don't grudge it. I only wonder the roof's not mended, that he charged us the mending of 2 years back. But I don't like to trouble his grace with it, not with his grief. Juliet stood in the doorway of the leaking cottage with the jelly in her hand, and looked at the old woman not troubling anyone. And she was ashamed, because that was it exactly. That was the whole machine. Grimshaw had not needed to be clever, only patient. He had built his theft on other people's decency, on a grieving man who would not look, on old women too loyal to complain, on a companion too frightened for her own skin to speak. Everyone in it was being good, and a house full of good, frightened, grieving people was being quietly gutted, and would go on being gutted, until someone was willing to be seen. Juliet went home and washed the jelly basket and made up her mind. She could not go to the Duke as a companion carrying a rumour. He would not believe her, or Grimshaw would call her a hysteric and have her turned off before the week was out. She needed the thing itself. She needed the true book and the fair book beside it, and a witness who could not be waved away. She needed to be, for once in her careful, invisible life, entirely and dangerously visible. She began to build her case the way she kept her accounts. Quietly, in her own hand, a shilling of proof at a time. Spring turned toward summer while she built it. She got the tradesman's own tallies, the butcher's stick, the chandler's book, the corn factor's receipts, under the honest pretext of settling the kitchen accounts herself, and she copied every figure fair. She had Widow Sefton and 2 other tenants make their marks to a plain statement of what rent they truly paid. She could not get into the office again. Grimshaw kept it locked now and watched her. But she did not need the office. She had built the true accounts from the outside in, from the doors and the tally sticks and the marks of honest people, and where her figures met the posted figures, they told the whole story in daylight. She built it at night, mostly, when the house was asleep and the passages were dark. She kept the fair copies in a false bottom she had made in her own small workbox, under the thimbles and the darning wool, where no maid would think to look, and no steward would dare. Each night she added what the day had brought her. A figure from the corn factor, a mark from a tenant, a receipt begged from a marrow tradesman on the honest pretext of the kitchen accounts. It was slow work, and it was frightening work, and she did it by a single candle with her door bolted, because she had understood from the first that a half-built case was worse than no case at all. A rumour Grimshaw could laugh away. A ledger he could not. Twice he nearly caught her at it. Once he came upon her in the north passage at dusk, a candle in her own hand. He asked her gently what business a companion had so near his office after dark. She was seeing the linen presses fast for the night, she said. It was true. He could not gainsay it. He looked at her a long moment. He did not like her being there. She saw that he did not like it, and she understood why. He had built his whole quiet theft on there being no one in the house who looked or listened or wrote things down. A companion the tenants had begun to bring their troubles to was exactly such a person. And troubles brought to the right person add up. So she did her honest work where he could see it, and she kept the ledger where he could not, and she waited. She had learned patience the way other women learn embroidery. She was very good at it. She could wait a man out the way she had waited out the mare, by giving him nothing to fight, until the only thing left to do was come to her hand. And while she built it, without meaning to, she and the Duke came to know one another. It began with the library. She had been sent to find a book of the Dowager's. The library at Lark Court was a long north room, full of 200 years of reading. It was the one room in the house the Duke still used. She found him there in the evenings more and more, not reading, only sitting with a book shut on his knee and the fire low. The first time she came upon him, she made to withdraw. He said, "Stay, find her book. You do not disturb me." So she found the book and stayed a moment by the shelves, and they talked of nothing, of the weather, of the mare. And after that, by no arrangement, she came most evenings, and he was most evenings there, and the library became a country the two of them shared. He was, she found, exactly what his grandmother had said. Not cold, drowning. Under the shut face was a man of dry, careful humour, and a great buried tenderness, gone all to grief now, like a garden gone to nettles, because no one has the heart to walk in it. He spoke of his sister once, only once. It was late, and the fire was down to embers, and he said, without looking at Juliet, "She sat in that chair, where you are. She would read out the foolish parts of the newspaper until I laughed. I did not laugh often. She counted it a personal triumph each time." He turned the shut book over in his hands. "I was in London when she took the fever. My man of business had matters that could not wait. I stayed a week over them. She was dead before I reached the North Road." He said it flatly, the way a man says a thing he has said to himself 10,000 times. Matters that could not wait. I have never been able to remember one of them. Juliet did not say, "I am very sorry." She had learned from his grandmother that it was the least useful sentence in the language. "She kept the whole house breathing," she said instead. "Your grandmother told me. That is a great deal for one young woman to carry. She must have loved it very much to carry it so well." The Duke looked at her across the embers. "You carry it now," he said. "Do not think I have not seen it. The flue, the table, the tenants' baskets. My grandmother's authority only reaches so far, Miss Eldstone. The rest of it is you." A pause. Why? It was the question she could not answer honestly without answering all of it. So she gave him a true thing that was not the whole thing. "Because a house ought not to die of neglect, while good people stand in it wringing their hands," she said. "I cannot bear waste, Your Grace. It is my besetting sin. I would tidy a battlefield." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The almost. "I begin to believe you would," he said. It was the dowager who made the thing official, in the way that old women make things official, which is to say, without asking anyone's leave. One afternoon in May, she sent Prue to fetch a small carved box from the cabinet in the south parlour. When Juliet came in for her 4 hours of reading, the box lay open on the little table. Inside it, on a bed of faded blue velvet, lay a great ring of keys. There were a dozen of them, or more, iron and brass, worn bright at the wards with 2 centuries of turning. They were the keys of Lark Court, the plate room, the linen presses, the cellars, the storerooms, the still room, the china closet, the muniment chest. Juliet knew what they were the instant she saw them, because a woman raised to run a house knows a housekeeper's keys the way a soldier knows a sword. These were Cecily's, the dowager said, and her mother's before her, and hers before that. They have hung on the same hook by the still-room door since before my grandson's grandfather was born. Her knotted hands did not touch the ring. When Cecily died, Grimshaw took them off that hook and locked them in his office. He told my grandson it was for safekeeping, and my grandson was too far gone in his grief to see the truth of it. A man who holds all the keys of a house holds the house. I have got them back. Do not ask me how. I am 81, and I have my methods. She looked up, and the old eyes were very bright. They are yours now, not the still-room hooks. Yours, on your person, on a chatelaine at your waist, where the whole house can see them and know who turns them. Juliet stood very still. Your Grace, I am a companion. The county will... The county, said Petronella, may go hang. I did not survive 4 monarchs and 2 bad marriages, to be told what the county will say by a girl who gentled an unbroken mare in the rain. She closed the box with a small, dry click. You have been running this house since April, with no more authority than my say-so, and your own 2 hands. It is time the house wore its truth on the outside. Take the keys, Juliet, and when the day comes that someone tries to take them off you, for someone will, you hold on. Juliet took the keys. They were heavier than she had expected. She wore them at her waist from that afternoon. Their small iron music went before her down every passage of Lark Court. The maids heard her coming. The tradesmen at the door heard her coming. And the sound of it, week by week, became the sound of the house itself, remembering how to be a house. She wore them the evening she next sat with the Duke in the library. He looked at them a long moment, hanging bright against her grey stuff gown. Something crossed his face that she could not read. Grief, perhaps, or the memory of another woman who had worn them, or the first faint stirring of a thing he had no name for yet. My grandmother gave you those, he said. It was not a question. She did, Your Grace. I told her the county would talk. Let it. He weighed the shut book in his hands. Cecily used to say a house could not be run by a man's signature. It wanted a woman's keys and a woman's eye, she said, or it went to the bad from the inside, while the master signed his name to the ruin of it. He was quiet a moment. I did not understand her. I understand her now. I have been signing my name to a great deal this year that I did not trouble to read. Juliet's heart went still. It was the nearest he had yet come to the thing she had built in her locked drawer, figure by figure, all that spring. Then, perhaps, she said carefully, Your Grace ought to begin reading again. He looked at her across the low fire, and for a moment she thought he would ask her outright what she knew. But he was not ready, and neither in truth was she. The moment passed, the fire settled, and they sat on in the shared country of the library, each holding a piece of the same truth, neither yet willing to lay it on the table between them. Lucretia came in June. Mrs. Lucretia Sedley was the Duke's first cousin, the only daughter of his father's only sister, and she had been born to more than she now had. Her own father had gambled the family portion into the sea. Her husband, a Mr. Sedley, had died, leaving her a jointure that dwindled with every quarter. She was 35, handsome in a hard, bright way. Since Cecily's death, she had come to Lark Court more and more often, and stayed longer and longer. She had a plan that was the twin of Silas Probyn's. The two of them had never met. Lucretia meant to be the next mistress of Lark Court. If she could not be its duchess, and she was his cousin, and he had never once looked at her so, then she would be its power behind the shut door. A grieving bachelor duke, a dwindling jointure, a great house with no mistress. It was, to a clever, desperate woman, an opportunity dressed as a family duty. She had chosen Grimshaw 3 years back, or Grimshaw had chosen her. It came to the same. She smoothed his way to the master. He saw that her small debts in the county were quietly settled out of the estate's quiet river. Each propped the other. Neither could have done it alone. And both of them understood the danger the moment Lucretia arrived that June. She saw the shortened dinner table. She saw the swept flue. She saw the small brown companion who moved through the house like its mistress. Something had grown up in the garden while their backs were turned. Lucretia was cleverer than Grimshaw. She did not smile and threaten. She watched. And within a week, she had understood something Grimshaw had not troubled to, that the companion was not merely competent, but hiding. Eldstone, she said one afternoon, sweetly, over the dowager's tea, turning the name on her tongue like a sweetmeat. Eldstone? From where, one wonders? There are Eldstones in Shropshire, I think. Are you a Shropshire Eldstone, Miss Eldstone? Nowhere so grand, ma'am. My father was a plain gentleman of the north. Was he? And left you nothing, poor creature, so that you must carry other women's linen. The smile did not reach the eyes. How wearing to have been born a little above one's fortune. One is neither one thing nor the other, neither served nor serving. It must be quite exhausting, always to be watched for the false step. She sipped her tea. I do watch, Miss Eldstone. It is my one accomplishment. My cousin thinks me an idle woman. But I watch. Juliet met the bright, hard eyes and understood that here was the real enemy. Not the pink steward. This one. Then you keep better accounts than I do, ma'am, she said. For I own I have never learned the trick of watching people. I only ever learned to watch the linen. The dowager, from the depths of her chair, made a small sound that, in a less dignified woman, would have been a snort. It moved quickly after that, the way a slow thing moves quickly at the last. Lucretia wrote letters. Among the wreck of her connections, she had a cousin married to an attorney in the north. She set that cousin to asking, in the mild way of country attorneys. Had anyone heard of a Miss Juliet Eldstone? A gentleman's orphan of about 22, who had left her people the previous autumn. It took 6 weeks. But the answer came, as such answers do, in the middle of everything else. It came on the very morning the household was thrown into an uproar of a different kind. For on that morning, a travelling chaise came up the Lark Court drive. Out of it, red-faced and righteous, stepped Mr. Silas Probyn. Grimshaw had not summoned him. Lucretia had not summoned him. He had traced her himself at last, the slow, patient way. A servant's letter home to Marrow. A word in a coaching inn. He had come to fetch his runaway ward and her £4,000 back to the son who was owed them. Juliet was in the forecourt with a basket of cut roses when the chaise stopped. She saw the door open. She saw the fat, familiar hand on the frame, the plum-coloured coat, the face that had loomed over her in the October drawing-room. The basket fell. The roses went everywhere across the gravel. "There you are," said Silas Probyn, with enormous satisfaction. "There you are, you ungrateful, undutiful girl. Do you know what you have cost me in post-horses? Get your box. You are going home to be married, as your dear father wished, and there is an end of it." And that was the moment, of all the moments, that the Duke of Northwell came down his own front steps. He had heard the chaise. He came out because a strange carriage in his forecourt was, still, faintly his business. He came down the steps into the middle of it. His cousin Lucretia was arriving from the garden with a letter in her hand and triumph in her face. His agent Grimshaw appeared soft-footed in the doorway. A fat stranger in plum bellowed at his grandmother's companion. And the companion herself stood white and still among a ruin of scattered roses. "What," said the Duke, in the voice that had once ordered a mare shot, "is the meaning of this?" It all came out at once, and it came out badly, as such things do. Silas Probyn was delighted to find a duke to appeal to. He laid the whole of it before him in his own colours. This young woman was his ward, his late uncle's daughter, an heiress of £4,000, held in his own honest keeping. She was promised to his son. She had run from her duty like a thief in the night. She had hidden herself in service under a false character. His Grace, all unknowing, had been harbouring a deceitful, fortune-hiding, unnatural girl who had lied her way under his roof, and Lucretia, stepping forward with her letter, confirmed every word in her sweet, hard voice. "It is quite true, cousin. I made inquiries. For the household's protection, you understand. She is exactly what this gentleman says. A gentleman's daughter with £4,000 of her own, playing at being a poor companion. One does ask oneself why. What a woman conceals £4,000 to scrub linen for. What else she might be concealing. Whose accounts, for instance, she has been so very busy copying." The letter trembled delicately in her hand. "I only think of your safety, cousin, and your grandmother's." Every face in the forecourt turned to Juliet. She looked at the Duke. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her that first wet evening, as at a bill he had not expected. Closed, withdrawing. She saw it happen. She saw him decide that she had lied to him. The one person in a year who had looked at him without fear. A woman with a hidden fortune, a hidden name, a hidden reason for copying his accounts. Exactly as his cousin said. She saw the library door shut behind his eyes, and she found, standing among the fallen roses, that she was not afraid any more. It is a strange thing to have dreaded a moment for 3 years, and to arrive in it, and find the dread all gone. She had spent her whole life being invisible in order to be safe. And here was safety, ending in a forecourt in front of everyone, and the sky had not fallen. There was only the truth left, and the truth, at least, was simple. "Every word this gentleman has said is true," she said. Her voice carried, clear and level, across the gravel. "I am Juliet Eldstone. My father left me £4,000 in trust, and named this gentleman, his nephew, my trustee. I ran from his house last autumn because he wished me to marry his son, so that my money would stay his. He has spent a great deal of it. The account he keeps as my trustee will show it to any honest man who asks to see it. I came here under my own name, which is Eldstone, and told the Dowager Duchess I was an orphan without prospects, which is true, for money you cannot touch until you are 5, and 20 is no prospect at all. I concealed the fortune. I did not conceal it to deceive this house. I concealed it to survive." She turned from Probyn to the Duke. She was aware of nothing but the Duke. "I have copied your accounts, Your Grace. Your cousin is quite right. I have copied them for 3 months. I have them in my room, fair and complete, the true rents against the posted rents, the tradesman's own tallies against the settled figures, the tenants' marks against the sums they were squeezed for. I have the roof over your own east wing that you paid £40 to mend last autumn, and that let the rain onto my head not a week past. I have Widow Sefton's cottage roof, charged to her 2 years since, and never mended at all. I did not bring them to you, because I was a coward, and because I had a fortune of my own to hide, and I told myself your house was not my affair." Her voice did not shake. "I was wrong on every count but the last. It is not my affair. I made it my affair. And you are being robbed, sir, root and branch, by a man standing in your own doorway, and I can prove it in an afternoon." For 1 heartbeat nobody moved. Then Grimshaw laughed, soft and pink and pleasant. It was the wrong thing. He knew it the instant it was out of his mouth. A man does not laugh at a true account. Lucretia's face had gone very still, and the Duke of Northwell was no longer looking at Juliet as at a bill he had not expected. He was looking at her as a drowning man looks at a rope. "Show me," he said. They did it in the library. It took the rest of that day and half the night. Juliet fetched her fair copies, 3 months of them, the whole quiet patient case, built a shilling at a time from doors and tally sticks and old women's marks. Dorset was sent for the tradesmen. They came that evening in their Sunday coats, uneasy in the great house. One by one, they laid their own books beside Juliet's and swore to the figures. The butcher, the chandler, the corn factor, the man from Marrow, who had never mended any roof over any east wing, because no one had ever paid him to. Amos brought the tenants, Widow Sefton on his arm. They made their marks again in the candlelight before the Duke's own eyes. When the tenants and the tradesmen had gone, the Duke sent Dorset to the estate office for the 2 brown books. Grimshaw had spent the evening growing smaller and pinker in his chair. He made a last soft attempt. The fair book was the only book, he said. The young lady was mistaken. A companion could not be expected to understand an estate's accounts. The Duke opened the worn book on the library table beside Juliet's fair copies. He turned the pages in silence. He understood the whole of it in about 4 minutes, being, as his grandmother had said, not a fool, but a grieving man, which is a different thing. He was very quiet when he had finished. He closed the worn book. He set his hand flat on the cover, on his sister's estate, on the 3 years he had refused to look at, and when he spoke, It was not to Grimshaw at all. She kept these, he said, to no one, to Cecily, to the shut east wing. She kept them fair. I never opened them after. I could not open them. He looked up, and his face was terrible and awake. I let this happen. I signed what you put before me, because signing was easier than reading her hand. His voice did not rise. It went the other way, down to the bone. Get out of my house tonight, Grimshaw. You will be at the Marrow Magistrates by noon tomorrow, and every figure this lady has taken will go with you. If you have a shilling of my tenant's money left, you will restore it. If you have not, you will answer for it as the law answers such men. Dorset. See him off the place. Watch him pack. Grimshaw went. There was, in the end, nothing else for him to do. At the library door he turned once, all the softness gone out of him, and looked at Juliet with a hatred that had no smile left in it at all. You could not simply keep to the linen, he said. No, Juliet agreed. I never could. Good night, Mr. Grimshaw. When he was gone, the library was very quiet. The Duke stood a long while, with his hand still on the worn book, as though he could not quite lift it away. Juliet gathered her fair copies from the table, page by page, the work of 3 careful months, and she did not know what to say to him, and for once in her life she did not try to find it. Some silences are better kept than broken. It was the Duke who broke this one. You knew, he said, for months. You carried the tenants' baskets. You mended my linen and sat with my grandmother, and you said nothing to me. He looked at her. Why not, if you knew? You could have come to me in April. I could not, she said. In April, you would not have believed me. A grieving man does not want a stranger to tell him his sister's house is being robbed. He wants to be left alone with his grief. So I did not bring you a suspicion, Your Grace. I waited until I could bring you a proof you could not refuse. She set the last page square on the pile. And there was my own reason, too, which you have heard in the forecourt this morning, and which does me no credit. I had a fortune of my own to keep hidden. A woman who makes herself noticed, makes herself found. So I chose to be safe, rather than useful, for as long as I dared. I am not proud of it. No, the Duke said slowly, but you did not choose it in the end. In the end you were seen, and you spoke, and you might have kept your head down, and your fortune hidden a while longer, if you had not. He was looking at her as though he had never properly seen her before, which, she thought, was perhaps the truth. My sister would have liked you. She had no patience with people who kept their heads down. A pause. Thank you, Miss Eldstone. I do not think I have said it. Thank you. It was 3 words, and from that spare and shut-up man, they were worth a great deal more than 3. Juliet inclined her head, and did not trust herself to answer, and took up her 3 months of honest figures, and left him alone in the library with his sister's true accounts open at last upon the table. That left Lucretia. She had sat very still through the whole long reckoning in the corner of the library. Her letter was crushed to nothing in her lap. She watched the machine she had helped to build come apart, plank by plank, in the candlelight. When Grimshaw was gone, she rose, and she was still handsome and still upright, and she made one last throw with the courage of a gambler, staking her last. You will make a great deal of me now, I suppose, she said to the Duke. Your loyal cousin, who settled her little debts through your steward. Oh, I knew. Of course I knew. Do you imagine a woman as poor as I am does not know exactly where every shilling comes from? Her voice was bright and brittle as struck glass. You will turn me out too. Where to, cousin? I have 100 a year and a widow's cap. I married where I was told and buried him, and got nothing for it but the privilege of being poor among people who were once my equals. You do not know what that is. You have never in your life not known where you would sleep. She was shaking now, though her chin was up. She hid £4,000 to be free of a fat man's son. I would have hidden it to be free of the whole grinding pretense. Do not look at me as though I were a monster. I am only afraid. I have been afraid for 15 years. It is very tiring, cousin. You have no idea how tiring it is. And there it was, the human fear under the bright, hard shell, laid open in the candlelight. The Duke's face had gone hard as the forecourt again. He opened his mouth. Juliet knew he was about to be just, and just would be the end of Lucretia Sedley. Turned out disgraced. 100 a year, a widow's cap, the county to talk. Your Grace, Juliet said. May I? He looked at her. He closed his mouth. He inclined his head. Juliet went and stood before the frightened, upright, hateful woman who had tried to ruin her that morning. She did not gloat. She had learned long ago that gloating is exactly what your tormentor expects. She had never once given a tormentor what they expected. You settled your debts through the estate, Juliet said quietly. That is theft, and you know it is theft, and so does His Grace. But you did not falsify the rents. You did not squeeze Widow Sefton for a shilling at Lady Day. That was Grimshaw's hand, not yours. You watched, and you profited, and you held your tongue, which is precisely the sin I committed myself, until this morning, so I am poorly placed to hang you for it. She held the bright, terrified eyes. There is a small dower house at the edge of the park. It is empty. It is sound. A woman might live in it decently on 100 a year, and be neither served nor serving, and stop being so very tired, if His Grace is willing. She did not look away. You would owe it to no one, least of all to me. I should like that understood. Lucretia stared at her. Whatever she had braced herself to meet, it had not been this, and it undid her worse than justice would have. Her face crumpled once, hard, and set again. Why? She said. It was not a graceful question. It was torn out of her. Because I know exactly how tiring it is, Juliet said. And because a house that has just thrown out one thief should not celebrate by making a beggar. Good night, Mrs. Sedley. The Duke of Northwell looked at his grandmother's companion across the wreckage of his own long blindness. And something in his face that had been shut since April came quietly, painfully open. The summer ball at Lark Court had been Cecily's ball. She had given it every summer. The one night the shut great rooms were opened, the county driven up the honey-coloured drive, the long gallery full of candlelight. There had been no ball for 2 years. And now the Dowager Duchess, who missed nothing and forgot nothing, announced it from the depths of her chair. There would be a ball again this summer. The house was breathing again. A house that is breathing again should be allowed to dance. You will open the rooms, she told Juliet. You will do the whole of it. The linen, the plate, the supper, the flowers, the 50 beeswax candles in the gallery, that my grandson will complain of the cost of and pay for gladly. The old eyes gleamed. You have run this house since April, girl. whatever anyone chose to call you. It is time the county saw who runs it. So Juliet opened the great rooms. She had the Holland covers struck, and the shutters folded back. 2 years of dust went out in pails. She filled the long gallery with early roses. 50 candles of good beeswax that did not smoke, for she had had the sconces cleaned herself. She let out one of Cecily's own gowns for herself, with the dowager's blessing, and Petronella's own maid to do it. A gown of soft dove grey, modest, unremarkable, exactly the colour a ballroom looks straight through. She wanted nothing else. She had not come to Lark Court to be looked at. She was looked at anyway. She was standing at the head of the gallery near midnight, in the grey gown. She saw that the supper went in, and the candles were trimmed. She was entirely absorbed in her work, entirely unaware of herself. And the Duke of Northwell crossed the whole length of the crowded room to her. The county saw him do it. That was rather the point, though Juliet did not understand it until afterward. He crossed his sister's ballroom, full of every family in the district. He stopped before his grandmother's brown-haired companion in her borrowed grey gown. He bowed to her as a man bows to a woman he means the whole county to remark. And he said, so that a good many people heard it, "Miss Eldstone, will you dance?" She had not danced in 3 years. Her feet remembered before her head did. And halfway down the set, in the candlelight, the Duke spoke low, under the music. The county was watching. The roses she had cut were going brown at the edges in the warm room. They will talk of nothing else for a 12-month. They will, Your Grace. You have quite ruined me. A companion cannot dance with a duke and stay a companion. No, he agreed. She cannot. He turned her under his arm, correct as a clock. I have thought a great deal these 3 weeks about what she might become instead. Have you? I have. My grandmother recommends the position of Duchess. She recommends it with some force. She says the house cannot spare you, and that she cannot spare you, and that I am a great fool who took a year to see what a mare saw in an afternoon. The almost smile. She is frequently right. It is her most trying quality. Juliet's heart was going very hard under the grey gown. She kept her feet in the figure. She kept her voice light, because if she did not keep it light, it would break. And what does the Duke recommend, sir? Setting his grandmother aside. The music turned them. He looked down at her, and the shut face was all the way open now, awake and unguarded and afraid. A man who had learned this spring exactly how much a house can lose, while its master will not look. The Duke recommends nothing, he said. The Duke has learned his lesson about signing what is put before him without reading it. The Duke will not put anything before you at all. He stopped, in the middle of the set, in front of everyone, which was not done, which set the whole gallery whispering. I will not offer you a marriage of convenience, Juliet. You have £4,000 of your own coming. You need no man's house to shelter in. In 3 years, you may be free of every soul who ever tried to spend your money or scrub you into silence. You do not need me. That is precisely why I am asking. Not because the house needs a mistress. It has one. It has had one since April. Because I would like, for the rest of my life, to be looked at by the one person who was never once afraid of me. His voice went quiet, right down to the bone. Marry me, as myself, choosing it, or do not, and stay and run the house I could not, and I will never trouble you with it again. It is entirely yours to say. Everything, from here, is yours to say." The whole gallery had gone still. 50 candles, the roses browning. 2 years of shut rooms open to the summer night. Juliet looked up at him. She thought of the wet forecourt, the mare, the snaffle, the 3 years she had meant to spend invisible and safe. Safe was a small word. She had been safe her whole life. She had never once, until this spring, been seen. "Bartholomew," she said. She had never used his name. The gallery heard her use it. He heard her use it. And something crossed his face that was worth more than the whole £4,000, and the house and the honey-coloured land it grew from. "That is a yes," she said, "in case the Duke requires it read aloud. I have grown very tired of holding my tongue. Yes, I will marry you, as yourself, choosing it." She could not help it. The almost smile was on her own mouth now. "On one condition, Your Grace." "Name it." "Widow Sefton's roof is mended before the harvest. Properly, by the man who is actually paid to mend it." The Duke of Northwell laughed. It was not a thing the county had heard in 2 years. It carried the length of the bright gallery. The Dowager Duchess, from her chair by the door, set down her glass. She permitted herself, at 81, to look for one moment entirely satisfied. By high summer, Juliet Eldstone ran the whole house, and there was no one left to call it anything but what it was. The roof over the east wing was mended by the Marrow man, who was paid the £40 it truly cost, and not a shilling more. The rents came in fair, and went into a single honest book, kept in Juliet's own hand, the true rents and the true repairs, no worn brown twin standing beside it in the dark. What Grimshaw had squeezed out of the tenants over 3 years was reckoned up to the last shilling. It was given back, cottage by cottage, where the man himself could not restore it, for there was little enough found on him. The Duke restored it out of his own pocket. He counted it cheaply bought. Grimshaw answered to the Marrow bench, and then to the assizes. His defeat gave Juliet no pleasure at all, only the sober satisfaction of a thing set right. Lucretia lived in the little dower house at the park's edge. She was not softened all at once. A woman does not unlearn 15 years of fear in a season. But she came up to the house at Juliet's asking. She found, being clever, that she was better at ordering a still room than at watching for other people's false steps. She took over the still room entirely. The 2 women reached, if not friendship, then the particular respect of people who both know how tiring it is to be poor among one's equals. Silas Probyn went home to Marrow with his post-horses unrepaid. His trustee's account would not, in the end, bear an honest man's looking at. When Juliet turned 25, 3 springs after she first walked up the Larkcourt Drive, £4,000 came into her own hands at last, clear and free. She gave the whole of it into the estate for the tenants' cottages. It was hers to give. A thing you give freely is the one kind of wealth no one can ever take. They were married quietly at Larkcourt Church, where Cecily lay. In the second week of that high summer, the Dowager Duchess came on her grandson's arm and wept exactly once. She pronounced it the outside limit of what any sensible woman should allow herself. She lived 2 years more to see the house full again. She died in her chair in the south parlour on a bright autumn morning, her spine straight to the last. That was the one grief the summer could not mend. It is the way of houses. The dead do not come back because the living have learned to be happy. But the grey mare grazed sound and easy in the near paddock. Cecily's still-room labels were kept in a drawer, in the young Duchess's own hand. Her ball was given every summer. She was not, in the ways that could be managed, forgotten. On a warm evening at the end of that first summer, the Duke of Northwell came looking for his wife. He found her where he had half known he would, in the library, in the chair by the fire. The great honest account book lay open on her knee. A single candle burned. She was not reading it. She was only sitting with it, the way a person sits with something that has come right at last. "You have run the whole house into good order," he said from the doorway. "There is nothing left to save. What will you do with yourself now, Duchess?" Juliet looked up at him across the low fire, level and grey clear and unafraid. It was the way she had looked at him from the wet gravel on the first hour of the first day, when he had told his butler she would not last a month. "I shall find something," she said. "I always do. I cannot bear waste, you know. It is my besetting sin." The almost smile. "Come and sit down. You are drowning in the doorway again." He came and sat down. The candle burned. The house breathed around them, honey-coloured, honest and full, a house that had been holding its breath for a very long time, and had finally, that summer, been allowed to let it go. She had come to Lark Court to disappear. She had, in the end, been the most thoroughly seen woman in the county, and she had found, to her own great surprise, a thing she had never guessed. Being seen by the right person was not the danger she had spent her whole life fearing. It was the only safety worth the name. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from, and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.